There's a version of you that works harder than most people around you. You show up, you stay late, you take the calls nobody else wants to take. You have read the books, watched the videos, taken notes in the margins. You have tried things, businesses, side projects, plans that made perfect sense on paper. And yet, something is not adding up. The results do not match the effort. The life you imagined when you were 25 looks nothing like the one you are actually living right now. And the worst part is not the failure. The worst part is that you cannot figure out why. You look at other people, not smarter, not more talented, not working harder than you, and somehow they are 2 or 3 levels ahead. They made moves that paid off, doors opened for them that you have been standing in front of for years, and you keep asking the same question, quietly, in the back of your mind. What are they doing that I am not? I want to sit with that question for a while before we try to answer it, because I think the question itself is part of the problem. Most people are asking what others are doing differently, but the real question, the one that changes everything, is a different one entirely, and we will get to it, just not yet. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from trying hard and going nowhere. It is not burnout from doing too much. It is something quieter than that. It is the feeling of running and realizing the treadmill is not moving. You are expending all this energy, making all these decisions, surviving all these months, and at the end of the year, you are more or less standing in the same place you started. Maybe you have a job that pays decently. Maybe you have built something small, a client base, a side hustle, a reputation in your field. But there is a ceiling you cannot seem to break through. And the ceiling is not made of other people's opinions or the economy or the city you live in. You can feel that. The ceiling, if you are honest with yourself, is coming from somewhere inside your own thinking. I've watched this happen to a lot of people, smart people, driven people, people with actual skill and real ambition. The problem is almost never effort. The problem is almost never talent. The problem almost every single time is that they're making moves without a master plan. Think about the last big decision you made, a career move, a business pivot, a partnership you walked into. How far out were you thinking? 1 step? Maybe 2? Were you reacting to something that happened, or were you choosing deliberately from a strategy you had already designed? Most people are playing checkers. They see what's in front of them. They make the best move available, and they deal with whatever comes next. And that approach works fine for survival. It does not work for building something real. There's a book called Your Next 5 Moves by Patrick Bet-David. He's an entrepreneur who built a financial services company from scratch with almost nothing, starting over in a country where he barely spoke the language. And what he eventually understood, not from a classroom, but from failing in the real world over and over, is that the gap between people who break through and people who stay stuck is almost never about effort or intelligence. It is almost always about how far ahead they're thinking, and more importantly, how clearly they know themselves before they start planning anything at all. This is going to take some time to unpack. Stay with me. Most people skip the most important step when they decide they want to build something, a business, a career, a financial future. The first thing they do is start moving. They build the website, they take the course, they talk to potential customers, they write the business plan. They are already 3 moves into a game they have not clearly defined yet. And the question they skip, the one that should come before any of that, is this: who am I? And what do I actually want? I know that sounds soft. It sounds like the kind of thing you put on a vision board and forget about, but I mean it in a very specific and practical way. Most people have not done the real work of understanding themselves. Not the surface version, not "I'm ambitious" or "I want financial freedom." I mean the deeper stuff. What are you genuinely good at that you cannot fake? What environment do you actually perform in versus the one you think you should perform in? What kind of risk are you honestly willing to carry, not in theory, but in practice, when the money is running low and the pressure is building. Here is where this becomes a real problem for most people in America right now. You spend 12, 16, sometimes 20 years being trained to perform inside other people's systems, school, corporate jobs, other people's expectations about what success looks like. And somewhere in that process, you absorb a definition of yourself that is not actually yours. You start making decisions based on what a successful person is supposed to do, not based on who you actually are and what kind of life you can genuinely sustain. So you pursue the path that looks right, and it works for a while. You climb the ladder or grow the side business or build the skill set, but at some point you hit a wall, and the wall is not external. It is a mismatch. The strategy you have been running does not fit the person running it. Patrick Bet-David's first move before anything else is to force you to answer the identity question, not in a vague self-help way, in a ruthless, specific way. What type of entrepreneur are you? What is your actual risk tolerance? Not the one you tell people at dinner, but the one that shows up at 2 in the morning when the bank account is thin. What motivates you when nobody is watching? What shuts you down when the pressure compounds? If you do not know the answers to those questions with real precision, every plan you build is sitting on an unstable foundation. You can make all the right moves in a game that is wrong for you, and that is a very expensive way to spend a decade. Most people never ask themselves this honestly, and this is where things start to change for the ones who do. Here is something I find genuinely interesting. The people who stay stuck the longest are not the ones who gave up early. They are usually the ones who tried the hardest. They read everything, they worked weekends, they were the most serious person in every room they walked into, and yet something kept them from breaking through. What happened is not complicated, but it is easy to miss. They were making moves, just not the right number of moves ahead. Think about how chess grandmasters think. When a beginner plays chess, they think about the move in front of them. Maybe they think 1 move ahead. If I do this, what does my opponent do? An intermediate player thinks 2 or 3 moves ahead. A grandmaster is thinking 5, 6, 7 moves into the future. And because they are thinking further ahead, every single move they make carries more information, more intention, more strategic weight. Most people who are building something, a business, a career, a financial plan, are playing at the 1 or 2 move level. They are reacting to what is in front of them. Something goes wrong, they fix it. An opportunity appears, they take it. A problem shows up, they solve it. And they feel productive because they are always doing something, but they're not building toward anything specific because they have not designed a destination in enough detail to actually aim at it. And here's the part that most people do not notice. The problem with short-term thinking is not just that you miss opportunities. It's that you actually create new problems for yourself without realizing it. You take a client you should not have taken because you needed the money, and 6 months later, that client is costing you more time than they are worth. You hire someone quickly because you needed help, and a year later, the business structure is built around that person's limitations. Every 1-move decision you made for short-term relief turned into a 3-move problem later. This is not a discipline problem. This is a thinking problem. The shift that changes everything is not working harder, it's learning to simulate the future before you step into it. Before you make the move, you ask, what does move 2 look like? What does move 3 look like? What could go wrong by move 4? What position do I want to be in by move 5? This kind of thinking feels slow at the beginning. It feels like overthinking. But the people who build real things, the ones who break through ceilings that used to stop them, they all eventually learn to think this way. Not because someone taught them strategy in school, because they got tired of fixing problems they accidentally created for themselves.
There is a conversation most people never have with themselves about the people in their lives. I am not talking about cutting off family or ending friendships. I am talking about something more specific and more practical than that. The people you spend the most time with are not just your social circle. They are a strategic decision, and most people have never looked at them that way. Here is what I mean. If you were trying to build something, a business, a financial life, a career that actually goes somewhere, the people around you are either compressing your timeline or extending it. They are either expanding what you believe is possible for yourself, or they are quietly reinforcing the ceiling that already exists. And often, the ones reinforcing the ceiling are not doing it intentionally. They are just living at a certain level of thinking. And when you spend enough time around any particular level of thinking, it starts to feel like the normal range. You probably already know this is true. Think about what happens when you spend a week around people who are genuinely operating at a higher level than you. Something changes. The conversations are different. The problems they are solving are different. The way they think about money, risk, opportunity, it is calibrated at a different level. And you walk away from that week thinking differently about yourself. Sometimes, permanently. The opposite is also true, and it is more dangerous because it is slower. Patrick Bet-David is direct about this. He calls it building your army. Not in a dramatic sense, he means it structurally. You need to be deliberate about who is around you when you're building something. Who are your mentors, people who are genuinely ahead of you, who have already solved problems you're about to face? Who are your peers, people moving at a similar pace who push you without being threatened by you? And who are your students, people you are helping, because teaching sharpens your own thinking in a way that nothing else does. Most people have this backwards. They have plenty of peers, some students, and almost no real mentors. And then they wonder why their thinking does not evolve fast enough. The hardest part of this is not identifying who belongs in which category. The hardest part is making the actual decision to spend more time with the people who challenge you and less time with the people who are comfortable to be around. Because comfort and growth rarely come from the same place. And most people, when forced to choose between them quietly and without drama, choose comfort every time. This is where things start to get honest.
There is a version of risk that most people understand. Starting a business, quitting the stable job, investing money you cannot afford to lose. These are visible risks. You can weigh them. You can feel them in your stomach. People talk about them. And then there is the other kind of risk, the one that almost nobody talks about because it does not feel like risk at all. It feels like responsibility. It is the risk of staying where you are. Every year you spend in a position that does not challenge you, every year you postpone the decision, every year you optimize your comfort instead of your growth, that is a cost. It does not announce itself. It does not send you a bill, but it is real, and it compounds just as steadily as any other kind of debt. The salary you are not earning, the skills you are not building, the contacts you are not making, the confidence that only comes from actually doing difficult things in the real world that you are not developing. These are not abstract losses. They are specific, and they accumulate over time. I think about the people who spend 10 years inside a corporate job they are not really committed to because it feels safer than taking a real risk. And at the end of those 10 years, they are 10 years older, with 10 years less energy, and a skill set that is 10 years narrower than it needed to be. The safety was an illusion. The risk was just disguised. Patrick Bet-David talks about this in terms of what he calls the entrepreneur equation. He does not romanticize it. He is not telling everyone to quit their job and start a business. He's making a more precise point. Every path has risk. The question is not, how do I avoid risk? The question is, which risk am I actually willing to carry? And does my current life reflect that choice? Or am I just defaulting to whatever feels safest in the moment? Most people have never asked themselves that directly, and if you sit with it long enough, you will realize that a lot of what you thought were careful, responsible decisions were actually just fear with better marketing. There is a thing that happens when you start building something real. People push back. Sometimes it is competitors trying to take market share. Sometimes it is critics trying to undermine you publicly. Sometimes it is people inside your own circle who get uncomfortable watching you grow. And the natural response, the human response, is to get defensive, to get angry, to spend energy fighting the noise. But here is what the best builders eventually figure out. Opposition is information. When a competitor attacks you aggressively, they are telling you exactly where you are threatening them. When someone criticizes what you are building, they are showing you either a real weakness or an insecurity in themselves, and both of those are useful. When someone inside your circle gets quiet as you grow, they are showing you something about the relationship you needed to understand anyway. Patrick Bet-David dedicates serious attention to understanding your enemies, not in a paranoid sense, but in a strategic one. Know who opposes you and why. Know the difference between someone who disagrees with your methods and someone who fundamentally does not want you to win. They require completely different responses, and treating them the same is a mistake that costs you energy, time, and sometimes your reputation. The more important point, though, is this. The people who are the most threatened by what you are building are usually showing you that you are building something real. Nobody attacks something that does not matter. If you are getting resistance, you are probably on the right path. The question is just whether you are going to manage that resistance strategically or react to it emotionally. Reacting emotionally is expensive. Reacting strategically is a move. Most people never get to the point where they can make that distinction clearly because they are too close to the situation to think 5 moves ahead. But when you start developing that capacity, when you can step back from the emotion of the moment and ask what this opposition is actually telling me, the whole game changes. We're getting close to something important now. You have probably consumed a lot of information in your life. Books, podcasts, courses, conversations with smart people. You know a lot, and the knowledge is real. It is not wasted. But at some point, most people have to confront a quiet and uncomfortable truth. Knowing is not the same as deciding, and deciding is not the same as moving. There are people who have read every business book available and still have not made a single concrete move toward the life they say they want. And it is not because they are lazy or fearful in the way most people use that word. It is because they have not made the actual decision. Not the idea of the decision, not the fantasy of the decision, the real one. The one where you accept what you are giving up to get what you want. The one where you stop treating the plan like a plan and start treating it like a contract. Patrick Bet-David's entire framework comes down to this. It is not enough to know what you want. You have to be able to map the moves, specific, sequenced, pressure-tested moves that will actually get you there. And then you have to make the first one. Not when it is comfortable, not when everything is aligned. Now. Because here's the truth about timing that most people learn too late. There is no perfect moment to start. There is only the moment when you decide that the cost of not starting finally outweighs the risk of beginning imperfectly. And for most people, that moment keeps getting pushed forward. Next year, after this situation stabilizes, when the kids are older, when the market is better, when I feel ready. And the years pass. Here is the answer to the question we started with. Why do motivated people spend years building and still never break through? It is not because they are not working hard enough. It is not because the market is unfair, although sometimes it is. It is not because they lack talent or drive or intelligence. It is because they were making moves without a master plan. They were solving immediate problems instead of engineering long-term positions. They were reacting to what life put in front of them instead of designing what they actually wanted to walk toward. And underneath all of that, the reason the master plan never got built in the first place is that they skipped the identity work. They never sat with themselves long enough to answer the hard questions. What do I actually want? Specifically, what kind of operator am I? Honestly, not ideally. What is my risk tolerance when it is real money and real consequences? What kind of life can I actually sustain, not just imagine? When you know those things, planning becomes possible. Real planning, not the kind where you write goals and forget them. The kind where you work backwards from a specific destination and identify the 5 concrete moves that create a bridge between where you are and where you are going. And then here is the part that is so simple it almost gets missed. You make move 1, not move 5, not the whole plan at once. Move 1, deliberately, with an understanding of what move 2 and 3 will look like and a rough map of what moves 4 and 5 might require. That's it. That is what separates the people who break through from the people who stay stuck. Not genius, not perfect information, not timing or luck or connections, though all of those help. The difference is the quality of thinking that happens before the action. The willingness to slow down long enough to think further ahead than what is directly in front of you.
I want to be honest with you about something before we close. This is not a quick fix. None of what I described today is going to transform your situation in a week or a month. Building the capacity to think 5 moves ahead, to really do it under pressure when the stakes are real, takes practice. It takes failing at one move thinking long enough to feel the cost of it. It takes a few rounds of building the wrong thing before you do the identity work seriously. But there are 2 things you can do right now that are not complicated. The first is this: the next significant decision you are facing, career, business, financial, whatever it is, before you make it, map the next 3 moves. Not just what do I do, write down, if I do this, what happens next? And then what? And then what after that? You do not need perfect answers. You need to at least be asking 3 moves out instead of 1. That single habit, practiced consistently, will change how you move. The second thing is harder but more important. Take one afternoon, not a journal entry, not 5 minutes between meetings, a real uninterrupted stretch of time, and answer this question with as much specificity as you can. What do I actually want my life to look like in 5 years, and who do I need to be to build that? Not what sounds good, not what would impress people, what you actually want. Most people have never done that at the level of honesty it requires, and most people are building toward a destination they have never clearly defined. You cannot navigate without a direction, and a general feeling of wanting more is not a direction. It is a starting point. The work is turning it into something precise enough to plan from. That is where the 5 moves begin. There is a version of you that is already capable of what you are trying to build. That version is not smarter than you are now. They are not more talented or better connected. They just learned to think further ahead earlier, and they stopped making moves before they understood the game they were actually playing. You showed up today. That matters. But showing up is only move 1. The question is, what moves 2, 3, 4, and 5 look like for you? If this shifted something in the way you see things, you will probably find the next one useful too.